Good evening, all, and welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we travel deep into the frozen heart of Canada's endless highway system, through isolated roads, forgotten corners, and small towns surrounded by miles of wilderness where help does not reach. Hidden along these lonely highways are 7 of the most disturbing horror stories ever reported, each one darker, stranger, and more unsettling than the last. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Dark Fears for daily horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, let us step into the shadows of Canada's endless highways, where civilization ends and terror begins. My name is Daniel Carter, and this happened in the winter of 2018 when I was 32 years old. At the time, I worked as a delivery driver, traveling between small towns in northern British Columbia. The route I took most often ran along Highway 16, a stretch of road locals sometimes called the Highway of Tears. I never believed in ghost stories or supernatural nonsense. To me, the highway was just a long, boring road cutting through forests and mountains. That night, however, something changed my mind forever. It was early February, and the snow had been falling all afternoon. By the time I left Prince George, darkness had already swallowed the highway. The only light came from my truck's headlights, reflecting off the swirling snowflakes. The road ahead was empty for miles. No cars, no houses, just endless black forest on both sides. At around 11:40 p.m., something appeared far ahead in my headlights. At first, I thought it was a person standing in the middle of the road. But as I got closer, I realized the shape was far too tall to be human. At first, I slowed the truck because I assumed someone needed help. Maybe a hitchhiker or someone whose car had broken down. But the closer I got, the more wrong the situation felt. The figure wasn't moving, not even slightly. It stood perfectly still in the center of the highway, its shape stretched unnaturally tall, maybe 8 or 9 feet high. My headlights fully illuminated it when I was about 50 yards away. That's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. It had no face. Where a face should have been, there was only a pale, smooth surface reflecting the light. I slammed my foot on the brakes. The truck screeched against the icy pavement, sliding slightly as it slowed. The thing didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't step aside. It just stood there, watching me with a face that didn't exist. And then, slowly, its long arms began to rise. For a few seconds, I just sat there gripping the steering wheel, staring at the thing standing in the middle of the highway. My truck's engine hummed softly, the headlights cutting through the snowfall and casting long shadows across the frozen road. The creature's arms kept rising slowly, bending at joints that looked too long and too thin to belong to anything human. They stretched outward like long branches. I felt my chest tighten. My first instinct was to reverse the truck and get the hell out of there. But before I could even move my foot to the gas pedal, the creature did something even stranger. It tilted its head. Or at least, what should have been its head. The smooth, blank surface where its face should have been turned slowly toward the trees on the side of the road, almost like it was listening to something deep in the forest. For a moment, everything went completely still. The snow stopped feeling real. The highway felt empty in a way I had never experienced before. Then the creature took one slow step forward. The step it took was wrong. I don't mean wrong in a normal sense. I mean, the movement looked unnatural, like the creature didn't fully understand how legs were supposed to work. Its knee bent backward slightly as it moved forward, and its body leaned in a jerking motion before settling upright again. I felt a wave of panic crawl up my spine. That thing was getting closer to my truck. Instinct finally kicked in. I slammed the truck into reverse and hit the gas. The tires spun wildly against the icy highway before finally gripping the pavement. The truck jerked backward while my headlights continued shining directly at the creature. And that's when it suddenly moved fast. 1 second it was stepping slowly. The next, its long body twisted forward with terrifying speed, its limbs stretching outward as it rushed toward the front of my truck. I shouted out loud and slammed the gear into drive. The truck lunged forward. For a moment, I thought I was going to hit it. But the creature suddenly vanished into the darkness beside the road. The moment the creature vanished into the trees, I slammed my foot on the gas and sped down the highway. My heart was pounding so hard, I could feel it in my throat. The truck roared forward through the snowstorm, and the headlights cut a narrow tunnel of light through the darkness ahead. I kept checking my mirrors every few seconds. At first, there was nothing behind me, just the empty road disappearing into the falling snow. But about half a mile later, something moved along the tree line to my right. It was keeping pace with my truck. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination or maybe the shadows of the trees. But when I turned my head slightly, I saw a tall shape weaving through the forest, moving between the trunks of the pines. It was running, and it was keeping up with me at nearly 60 miles per hour. Branches snapped and snow sprayed into the air as the thing moved through the woods beside the highway. And then it suddenly stopped. At first, I thought it had finally given up. The tree line beside the road became still again, and the only sound was the low rumble of my truck engine and the wind pushing snow across the asphalt. I let out a shaky breath and loosened my grip on the steering wheel. But that relief lasted only a few seconds, because suddenly, the CB radio in my truck crackled to life. I hadn't heard another driver on that channel all night. The static burst through the cab so loudly that it made me jump. Then a voice came through. Except, it wasn't really a voice. It sounded like someone trying to imitate human speech, but failing. The words came out slow and broken. "Da, Neil." My entire body froze. No one should have known my name out here. The radio crackled again. "Da, Neil, stop." I stared at the dark highway ahead, feeling a cold dread spread through my chest. Something out there knew exactly who I was. For several seconds, I just sat there gripping the steering wheel, staring at the CB radio like it had just come alive. The static hissed softly between broken bursts of sound. No other drivers were supposed to be anywhere near this stretch of Highway 16 at that hour. I'd passed the last gas station nearly 40 miles back. Yet the voice had said my name. Slowly, like it was learning how to pronounce it. I reached forward with a shaking hand and turned the radio volume down, hoping the noise would stop. But before my fingers even touched the dial, the radio crackled again. "Daniel." The voice was closer now, clearer. My stomach dropped as I glanced toward the dark forest outside the passenger window. That's when I saw movement between the trees again. The tall figure stepped out from the shadows, walking along the side of the highway. Its long limbs moved in that same unnatural way, bending too far at the joints. And somehow, it was already ahead of my truck. I slammed the brakes again without even thinking. The truck skidded slightly on the icy pavement before coming to a rough stop in the middle of the highway. My headlights lit up the creature clearly now. It stood on the shoulder of the road about 30 yards ahead. Its body was impossibly thin, almost like stretched skin pulled over long bones. The arms hung down nearly to its knees, swaying slightly in the wind. But what terrified me most was the way it faced my truck. That blank, pale surface where its face should have been was pointed directly at me. Then the CB radio crackled again. "Da, Neil?" This time, the voice didn't sound like it came from the radio. It sounded like it came from outside the truck. The creature slowly raised one of its long arms and pointed directly at me through the windshield. The moment it pointed at me, pure panic took over. I threw the truck back into drive and slammed the accelerator to the floor. The engine roared as the truck shot forward across the icy highway. For a split second, I thought I was about to crash straight into the creature. But just like before, it moved. Not by stepping, not by running. It simply shifted sideways, disappearing into the darkness beside the road faster than anything that size should be able to move. I sped past the spot where it had been standing and kept driving without slowing down. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely keep the truck steady. Miles passed. 10 minutes, then 20. No sign of the creature, no voices on the radio. Eventually, the highway lights of a small town appeared in the distance. I had never felt so relieved to see civilization in my life. But as I reached the first intersection, the CB radio crackled again, and a familiar voice whispered, "Daniel, you passed me." "You?" I slammed the brakes once more, my heart nearly stopping as the words echoed through the truck cab. Slowly, I turned my head toward the passenger side window. At first, I didn't see anything. Just the empty road, a frozen ditch, and the dark wall of trees beyond it. Then something moved. Standing just a few feet from the truck, barely visible in the glow of a distant street light, was the same tall shape. The creature had somehow gotten ahead of me again. It stood perfectly still beside the road, its long arms hanging at its sides. But this time, the blank surface where its face should have been was only inches from the glass of my window. And for the first time, I realized something that still haunts me. My CB radio wasn't transmitting. There was no signal, which means the voice calling my name all night was never coming from the radio. It was coming from that thing. My name is Rachel Morgan, and this happened to me in the fall of 2021 when I was 27 years old. At the time, I was driving across northern Ontario, heading toward Thunder Bay to start a new job at a wildlife research center. It was supposed to be a simple road trip, just a long drive through forests and quiet towns. But that night, I learned that some highways in Canada hide places that should not exist. I had been driving along Highway 11 for nearly 6 hours. The road stretched endlessly through thick forests, and the sky above was completely black except for the faint glow of distant stars. Around 1:15 a.m., my gas gauge dropped dangerously close to empty. My phone had no signal. No towns appeared on the map for at least another 40 miles. Just when I started to panic, I spotted a small gas station ahead on the side of the highway. The lights were on, but something about the place felt wrong. As I pulled into the gas station, the uneasy feeling in my stomach only grew stronger. The place looked old, much older than most stations I had seen along the highway. The sign above the pumps flickered weakly, casting a dull yellow light across the cracked pavement. What really bothered me was the silence. No other cars, no trucks, nothing. Just my engine idling in the cold night air. I stepped out of my car and looked toward the small convenience store beside the pumps. The windows were fogged over from the inside, and a dim fluorescent light buzzed softly above the door. A handwritten sign hung on the glass. It read, "Open, But as I stood there, staring at the building, I noticed something strange. The snow on the ground around the station was completely untouched. No tire tracks, no footprints. It looked like no one had been there for days. Then the store door slowly creaked open by itself. For a moment, I just stood beside my car, staring at the slowly swinging door of the convenience store. The wind wasn't strong enough to move it, yet the door creaked open a few inches more before stopping. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the clerk inside had opened it and just stepped away for a second. Still, the untouched snow bothered me. If someone was working here, where were their footprints? Trying to calm my nerves, I walked over to the nearest pump and inserted my card. The machine beeped softly and began filling my tank. The sound of gasoline flowing into the car felt strangely loud in the otherwise silent night. While the tank filled, I kept glancing at the store. The door was still open, and the inside lights flickered faintly. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to step inside and pay for a drink before getting back on the highway. As I approached the entrance, the buzzing fluorescent light above me suddenly flickered hard, and from somewhere inside the store, I heard a chair scrape slowly across the floor. I stopped walking the moment I heard the chair move. The sound was slow and deliberate, like someone dragging furniture across the tile flooring. "Hello?" I called out toward the open doorway. My voice sounded strangely small in the cold air. No one answered. After a few seconds, I stepped inside the store. The fluorescent lights hummed above me, casting a harsh white glow over dusty shelves filled with old snacks and faded drink bottles. The place looked like it hadn't been updated in years. Behind the counter sat an old cash register and a small wooden chair. Except the chair was lying on its side, like someone had just knocked it over. I glanced around the empty room. There was no clerk, no customers, no sound at all. Then I noticed something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The large wall clock above the counter had stopped. Its hands were frozen at 1:12 a.m., 3 minutes earlier than when I arrived. For a few seconds, I stood there staring at the frozen clock above the counter. Something about it made the entire room feel wrong, like time itself had stalled inside that building. I checked my phone. 1:18 a.m., 6 minutes later than the clock on the wall. Trying to ignore the uneasy feeling creeping through my chest, I walked toward the counter and called out again. "Hello? Anyone working tonight?" The fluorescent lights buzzed loudly overhead. Still no answer. Behind the counter was a narrow hallway leading toward what looked like a storage room. A dim yellow light glowed faintly at the far end. That's when I heard it. A quiet sound. Footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps coming from the hallway. My heart began pounding in my ears. I waited for someone to step out, expecting maybe an old clerk or a tired employee. But the footsteps stopped just before reaching the corner. And whoever was there didn't come into view. I took a slow step backward, keeping my eyes locked on the dark hallway. "Is someone there?" I asked, my voice barely steady. For several seconds, there was no response. Just the buzzing lights and the faint hum of a refrigerator unit somewhere in the store. Then the footsteps started again. This time they were louder, closer. Something was walking down that hallway toward the front counter. But the pace was strange. Instead of normal steps, it sounded like someone dragging their feet heavily across the floor. Scrape, step, scrape, step. I held my breath as the shadow at the end of the hallway slowly stretched across the tile floor. And then a man stepped into view. At first glance, He looked like an elderly gas station clerk wearing an old uniform. But something about him felt horribly wrong. His head was tilted slightly to the side, and his eyes were completely black. For a moment, I couldn't move. The man stood behind the counter, staring directly at me with those dark, empty eyes. Up close, he looked even older than I first thought. His skin was pale and thin, stretched tightly across his face like wax that had begun to melt. He didn't blink, he didn't speak, he just watched me. Trying to act normal, I forced a small, nervous smile and pointed toward the drink cooler near the wall. Do you mind if I grab a water?" I asked. The man's head tilted slowly in the other direction, like he was trying to understand what I had said. Then his mouth opened. But instead of answering, he made a strange clicking sound with his tongue. The sound echoed across the empty store. Click, click, click. My stomach dropped when I realized something even more disturbing. The man wasn't looking at my face. His eyes were fixed on my reflection in the glass cooler door behind me. A cold wave of fear washed over me. Slowly, I turned my head toward the glass cooler behind me. At first, I only saw my own reflection staring back. Wide eyes, pale face, and the dim fluorescent lights above. But then, I noticed something that made my heart nearly stop. In the reflection, the man behind the counter wasn't standing still. While his real body hadn't moved at all, his reflection was slowly leaning forward across the counter. Its long arms stretched farther than they should have, bending in unnatural ways as they reached toward me. I whipped around instantly. The real man was still standing in the same spot, completely motionless. But when I turned back to the cooler reflection, the thing in the glass was now much closer, and its black eyes were locked directly onto mine. Then the store lights flickered violently, and the reflection suddenly smiled. The moment the reflection smiled, I felt pure terror take over my body. I spun away from the cooler and ran straight for the door. My boots slammed against the tile floor as I rushed past the counter. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the clerk still standing there, his head tilted and his dark eyes following my movement. But he never tried to stop me. That somehow made it even worse. I burst out into the freezing night air and nearly slipped on the snow while running to my car. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped my keys twice before finally unlocking the door. The moment I got inside, I locked every door and started the engine. As the headlights lit up the gas station again, I looked back toward the store. The front door was still open, and the clerk was now standing in the doorway. Except something about him had changed. His body looked taller, and his arms now hung nearly to his knees. I didn't wait to understand what I was seeing. I slammed the car into drive and sped out of the gas station parking lot, tires crunching over the snow as I raced back onto Highway 11. The station quickly disappeared behind me in the darkness. For the next 20 minutes, I drove without stopping, my heart slowly beginning to calm as the empty highway stretched ahead. Eventually, I reached a larger town where the streetlights lit up the road. That's when I saw another gas station. This one was bright, modern, and open. I pulled in immediately and rushed inside to tell the clerk what had happened. The man behind the counter listened carefully, then frowned. "There's no gas station out there," he said. I told him exactly where I had stopped. His face turned pale. "That station burned down in 1987, he said quietly. "They never rebuilt it. And according to the records, the clerk who worked there died inside." My name is Ethan Walker, and this happened to me during a summer road trip in 2019 when I was 24. I was driving across Ontario along the Trans-Canada Highway, heading west toward Winnipeg. The trip had been uneventful until late one night, when I found myself alone on a long stretch of highway, surrounded by dense forests and the soft glow of distant stars. The road was quiet, almost unnaturally so. No other vehicles passed me for nearly 30 minutes, and the isolation made the air feel heavy. I was driving cautiously, keeping my eyes peeled for wildlife or anything else that might cross the road. It was around 11:45 p.m. when I saw a figure standing on the shoulder up ahead. At first, I thought it was a hitchhiker, a young man, perhaps in his 20s, wearing a hoodie and waving for a ride. I slowed the car and rolled down the window as I approached, thinking I could help him get to the nearest town. But the closer I got, the stranger he looked. As I slowed to a stop, the hitchhiker raised his hand again. He was thin, almost unnaturally so, and his movements were jerky, like he wasn't fully in control of his body. His hood partially covered his face, but I could see pale skin and dark, hollow eyes peering out at me. "Need a ride?" I asked cautiously, trying not to show my unease. He nodded, but didn't speak. I unlocked the passenger door and he climbed in silently. The air inside the car felt cold immediately, like he carried winter with him despite the warm summer night outside. I tried to make conversation, asking where he was headed, but he didn't answer. Not a word. Just stared straight ahead, his eyes fixed on the windshield. A few minutes into the drive, I noticed something terrifying. His shadow didn't match his body. It stretched long and warped across the passenger seat, twisting in ways a normal human shadow shouldn't. And then I heard a low, almost inaudible whisper. "Drive faster, or I'll leave you behind." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I tried to focus on the road, keeping my eyes on the dark stretch ahead. The forest on both sides of the highway seemed to press in closer as we drove, the trees bending in the wind like skeletal hands reaching for the car. I stole a glance at the passenger seat. The hitchhiker hadn't moved. He was still staring straight ahead, pale and motionless, his eyes cold and empty. But the more I looked, the more I noticed how unnatural his posture was. His back was perfectly rigid, and his arms hung loosely at impossible angles, elbows bent too far, wrists twisted strangely. Suddenly, he spoke. Not with words this time, but with a long, low hiss that made my blood run cold. It sounded like air escaping from deep within his chest. The car's interior grew icy, and condensation formed on the windows as if the summer night had vanished. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination, but I knew it wasn't. Something about him was not human. I swallowed hard, gripping the steering wheel tighter. The hiss repeated, this time slightly louder, like it was surrounding me from all directions inside the car. My knuckles turned white, and I could feel sweat running down my back despite the icy cold air. I tried to keep talking. "Where are you coming from? What's your name?" But he didn't respond. His eyes never left the road ahead. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to pull over, to get out and run. But the highway was completely empty, and the dark forest on either side made the thought impossible. Then I noticed something horrifying. The rearview mirror reflected not just my face, but a shadowy figure standing in the back seat, something tall, faceless, with arms reaching unnaturally far toward me. I whipped my head around. The back seat was empty. The whisper came again, this time directly in my ear. "Don't look back, or you'll stay forever." My heart felt like it had stopped, and I knew that if I didn't keep moving, I wouldn't survive the night. I slammed my foot on the gas and forced the truck to push faster into the darkness. The tires skidded slightly on patches of frost, but the car surged forward. My eyes darted constantly between the road ahead and the passenger beside me. The hitchhiker's pale face was still unmoving, almost eerily calm, while the shadowy presence in the back seat seemed to stretch and flicker in the corners of my vision. The whisper came again, this time sharper. "Faster, or you'll never leave." My hands tightened around the wheel as panic took over. I felt like the forest itself was closing in, the trees bending toward the highway as if they were alive. Every mile felt endless, the road straightening only to twist again into dark curves with no signs of civilization. Then, without warning, the shadow in the back seat lunged toward the rearview mirror, obscuring my reflection. I screamed and jerked the wheel, barely keeping the car on the road. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. The next stretch of highway felt endless. Every time I glanced at the back seat, I swore the shadowy figure was closer, its shape twisting and stretching in impossible ways. The whispering continued, now louder and more urgent, surrounding me. "Faster, or stay forever." I realized I had to do something. I couldn't just keep driving blindly. I scanned the road for a place to pull over, but the forest pressed in on both sides. No lights, no signs, nothing but endless blackness. My phone still had no signal, and the sense of isolation made the air feel thick, almost tangible. I tried to speak to the hitchhiker again, my voice shaking. What do you want? Who are you?" He didn't answer. His eyes were blank, staring past me into the dark night. The longer I looked at him, the more I felt he was watching not me, but something behind me. A sudden movement caught my eye in the rearview mirror. The shadow lunged again, closer than before. I couldn't take my eyes off the rearview mirror. The shadowy figure seemed to be growing taller, stretching unnaturally across the back seat. Its limbs twisted in ways that no human should be able to. And the whispering voice now felt like it was inside my skull. My hands shook so violently, I struggled to keep the car steady. The hitchhiker beside me remained rigid, his hollow gaze fixed straight ahead. I realized with growing horror that he wasn't just a passenger. He was part of whatever was stalking me. The longer I stared, the more I felt the presence behind me, closing in, waiting for me to make a mistake. I tried to keep my breathing under control and focused on the road. But when I glanced at my side mirror, I saw something that froze my blood. There, in the faint glow of the passing road reflectors, another figure stood in the middle of the highway. Tall, thin, faceless, and motionless, blocking my path ahead. I slammed on the brakes, heart racing. The car skidded slightly on the asphalt as I slammed on the brakes. My pulse was deafening in my ears. The faceless figure in the road didn't move. It just stood there, arms long and unnaturally thin, swaying slightly as if testing me. I glanced back at the rearview mirror. The shadow in the back seat was gone. For a heartbeat, relief flooded me. But then I noticed the hitchhiker's head turning slowly toward me. His mouth opened wide, forming a silent scream, but no sound came out. The darkness seemed to pour out of him, filling the car with a chilling pressure that made my lungs ache. I forced my eyes back to the road ahead. There was nowhere to go. The highway stretched endlessly, but the faceless figure didn't move, and no oncoming lights appeared. Every instinct screamed at me to escape, but I felt trapped, pinned between two horrors. And then the whisper came again, closer than ever. "You can't leave. Not tonight." I swallowed hard, my hands trembling on the wheel. There was no way around the faceless figure. I couldn't swerve into the forest. The trees were thick, and the ground sloped sharply into unseen ditches. I had to face it head on. I gritted my teeth and slowly started to inch forward, barely moving the car. The faceless figure didn't flinch. It just stood there, arms dangling unnaturally, blocking the highway as if it had always belonged there. My stomach churned as I noticed its shadow stretching impossibly long across the road, merging with the darkness of the forest. Then, the whisper came again, inside my ear. "You're mine." I slammed my foot on the gas, praying the figure would vanish. For a moment, I thought I saw the hitchhiker's reflection in the side mirror, leaning toward me with a twisted grin, shadowy hands reaching. My pulse pounded. The car roared forward, and the faceless figure didn't move. But suddenly, the highway ahead twisted in a way it hadn't moments before. Like the road itself had changed. The road straightened again, and I realized I was moving past the figure. It hadn't stepped aside, it hadn't moved. Somehow, I had driven through it. My heart felt like it might stop, but relief surged briefly. The rest of the highway was empty. The shadow in the back seat never returned. The hitchhiker remained silent, pale and rigid, staring straight ahead as if nothing had happened. I didn't dare speak, focusing only on driving until I reached the next town. Once in the safety of a gas station in Thunder Bay, I stopped, parked, and finally turned to the passenger seat. The hitchhiker was gone. No doors had opened, no window had been rolled down. The seat was empty. I checked the area around the car. No sign of anyone. No footprints, no tire marks, nothing. To this day, I don't know who or what got into my car that night. But I know one thing. If you see someone on the highway after dark, sometimes stopping is far more dangerous than driving past. My name is Lena Thompson, and this happened to me in the summer of 2020. I was driving across northern Ontario along Highway 17, returning home from a long family visit in Sudbury. The day had been hot, and by the time the sun dipped below the horizon, exhaustion had set in. The highway stretched endlessly through dense forests, and the fading light made everything feel more isolated than usual. It was just past 9:30 p.m. when I noticed a small motel sign glowing faintly in the distance. Rest Haven Motel. Relief washed over me. I needed a break, a shower, and maybe a meal. The thought of stopping felt like salvation after hours of driving. As I pulled off the highway, I noticed how strangely quiet everything was. No other cars in the parking lot. No flickering neon lights. Just the faint, flickering glow of the motel sign and the dark silhouette of the building beyond it. Something about the place felt wrong. I parked the car and stepped out, stretching my stiff legs. The air was unnaturally cold for a summer night, and a thin fog clung to the asphalt. The motel building was old, worn paint, peeling shutters, and windows that reflected nothing but blackness. The front door was slightly ajar. I called out politely, "Hello? Is anyone here?" My voice echoed across the empty parking lot, but there was no answer. I noticed something strange as I walked toward the lobby. The gravel around the entrance was completely undisturbed. No tire marks, no footprints. It was as if no one had arrived here in weeks, or even years. Still, I needed a room. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The lobby was dark, lit only by a single flickering bulb overhead. Dust covered the counter, and an old rotary phone sat silently on the desk. Then I heard it, a faint creak, like someone walking slowly on the floor behind me. I froze in place, my heart hammering in my chest. The creaking sound came again, slow and deliberate, echoing from the dark hallway beyond the lobby. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" But the only reply was the soft buzz of the flickering light above me. Trying to convince myself it was just my imagination, I stepped toward the hallway. The air grew colder with every step, and the scent of damp wood and old carpet filled my nostrils. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisting unnaturally as the single bulb above flickered again. Then I saw it. At the far end of the hallway, a door slowly opened by itself. A dim light spilled out, revealing a narrow corridor lined with rooms. But the longer I stared, the more I realized the hallway was wrong. The walls seemed to stretch farther than they should, bending slightly as if the building itself had shifted. My stomach turned. Something inside that corridor was waiting for me, and it wasn't human. I wanted to turn and run back to my car, but my feet felt like they were glued to the dusty tile floor. The door at the end of the hallway creaked open wider, and I could just make out a dark figure standing inside one of the rooms. Its silhouette was unnaturally tall, and the way it leaned to one side didn't make sense, like gravity had no hold over it. A low whispering sound echoed through the corridor, unintelligible but urgent. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but my body refused to obey. I tried calling my phone, hoping to get signal, but the screen stayed black. No bars, no service, nothing. The room seemed to swallow light and sound alike, as if the motel existed in its own reality. A sudden sound, like dragging metal, came from the floor above me. My heart raced as I realized the figure wasn't alone. Steps were approaching, heavy and uneven, echoing through the empty building. I forced myself to take a step back toward the lobby, but the floor felt uneven, like the building itself was shifting beneath my feet. The whispering grew louder, echoing off the warped walls, circling me from every direction. I could barely make out the sound of heavy, dragging footsteps above, moving rhythmically, almost like someone or something was pacing, waiting for me to make a mistake. I glanced toward the motel rooms again. The tall shadow in the doorway hadn't moved, yet the air around it seemed to ripple unnaturally. My throat went dry, and a cold sweat ran down my back. My instinct screamed at me to flee, yet fear froze me in place. Then I heard it. A low, guttural growl emanating from the open room. My blood ran cold. I took a shaky step closer, trying to see who or what it was, and that's when I noticed it. The figure had no feet touching the floor. Its body floated slightly above the ground, swaying in the dim light, and its head turned slowly toward me. Panic surged through me. I stumbled backward, nearly colliding with the counter in the lobby. Every instinct screamed at me to get outside, but the hallway seemed to stretch farther the longer I looked at it, like it had no end. My mind couldn't process how a single building could bend reality. The whispering became urgent, almost demanding. "Stay, stay." It wasn't just in the hallway. It was inside my head. My heart pounded as I tried to move toward the exit, but the floor felt sticky, as if the building itself wanted to trap me. Suddenly, the front door slammed shut with a deafening bang, and the flickering light went out completely. Darkness enveloped the lobby and hallway in an instant. I fumbled for my phone, but it remained dead. From the pitch-black hallway, the floating figure let out a low, echoing laugh, a sound that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. And then I felt something brush against my arm, cold, wet, and heavy. I screamed and yanked my arm away from whatever had touched me, but the sensation lingered, cold, wet, and impossibly heavy, like the hand of a corpse pressing against my skin. My eyes darted frantically around the lobby, searching for any source of light. The flickering bulb overhead finally sparked back on, revealing the hallway once more. The floating figure was gone, but in its place, dozens of shadowy shapes swirled in the corridor, writhing and stretching, their forms twisting as if they were made of smoke. The whispers multiplied, overlapping into a cacophony of voices. Stay, forever, belong. I realized then that the motel itself was alive, feeding on fear, warping reality around anyone who entered. Every instinct screamed at me to escape. I ran toward the exit, tripping over loose floorboards, my heart racing, my breath ragged. Just as I reached the front door, I noticed something horrifying. Through the foggy glass, the parking lot was no longer empty. Hundreds of shadowy figures, pale, faceless, and unmoving, stood silently among the mist, staring directly at me. I slammed the door open and bolted into the foggy parking lot, my boots crunching over gravel. Every step felt like running through a dream where gravity and time had no meaning. The figures in the mist didn't move, yet I could feel their gaze crawling over me, heavy and suffocating. I reached my car, fumbled with the keys, and jumped inside, locking every door. My hands shook violently as I turned the ignition. The engine roared to life, but the figures were still there, unmoving, faceless, silent, as though the world outside had frozen just for them. I floored the accelerator and raced onto Highway 17. The fog clung to the car, making every mile feel endless. Behind me, I could see nothing but darkness. But I knew those figures hadn't truly vanished. They were waiting for the next traveler, the next soul foolish enough to stop. I never returned to that highway after dark, and I never, ever trusted a glowing motel sign again. Even after I hit the highway, the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. The fog seemed to follow, curling around the car like fingers reaching for the tires. My pulse raced, each heartbeat echoing in my ears like a drum. The road stretched endlessly, straight and empty, yet I felt as though I was moving through a nightmare that refused to end. I dared a glance at the rearview mirror. For a heartbeat, the back seat was empty. Relief surged, but then I saw a faint, shadowy outline in the fog behind the car, a figure hovering impossibly close, its pale face featureless, eyes hollow, limbs stretched inhumanly long. My stomach churned, and I realized the motel's horrors hadn't left me. They had followed. The whisper came again, low and persistent, echoing inside my skull. You can't leave. Not yet. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, tears streaming down my face, and prayed for a town, a light, anything that could break this relentless chase. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell. The fog finally began to lift, revealing distant streetlights of a small town. Relief surged, but my hands didn't stop shaking. As I pulled into a gas station, I parked and dared to breathe. I glanced at the back seat. Empty. No sign of the shadow, no sign of the motel's curse. My phone flickered to life, and for the first time that night, I felt a glimmer of safety. Later, I asked the locals about the Rest Haven Motel. Their faces went pale. There hasn't been a motel there in decades, one man said. It burned down in the early 1980s. Anyone who stops on that stretch at night, some say they never make it back. I never return to Highway 17 after dark, but sometimes, when I drive late, I swear I see a faint glow in the distance, like a flickering motel sign, waiting for the next traveler. My name is Jacob Mercer, and this happened to me in the fall of 2018. I was driving my old pickup truck along a remote stretch of Highway 11 in northern Ontario, heading home after a late-night delivery. The highway was practically deserted, stretching endlessly through dense forests that seemed to swallow every sound. The wind whistled through the trees, and the faint hum of my engine was the only noise breaking the eerie silence. It was around 1:30 a.m. when I noticed a large semi-truck parked on the shoulder. At first, I thought it had broken down. Its hazard lights blinked slowly, casting dim orange reflections on the wet asphalt. I slowed down and considered stopping to offer help. As I approached, I saw the cab was empty. No driver. The truck's engine was still running, tires spinning faintly as if it was waiting for someone. A chill ran down my spine. Something about the truck felt wrong. Curiosity and fear battled inside me. I slowed to a stop and stepped out, crunching on gravel beneath my boots. The wind seemed to whisper, carrying faint sounds of distant trees creaking and snapping. I cautiously approached the truck, peering into the empty cab. The driver's seat was warm, almost as if someone had just left. I glanced around, but the highway stretched endlessly in both directions. No buildings, no other vehicles, nothing but forest and darkness. A faint mist began rising from the asphalt, curling around my legs. Then I noticed something horrifying. The rear-view mirrors reflected something I couldn't see directly. Shadowy figures, tall and thin, standing in the tree line, motionless, watching. My heart pounded, and I stumbled backward, nearly falling. I turned to get back in my truck and realized with growing dread that my pickup had vanished. The gravel, the forest, the semi-truck, all that remained was empty road and fog. Panic surged through me. I spun around, scanning the empty highway, the dense forest, and the fading fog. My pickup was gone, vanished like it had never existed, leaving me stranded beside the mysterious semi. The night felt heavier, the darkness thicker, and the forest closer, as though it were reaching out for me. I forced myself to take a step back toward the semi-truck, hoping the cab might offer some clue. But the shadows in the mirrors seemed to grow taller, stretching impossibly toward the fog. My pulse pounded so violently I could feel it in my throat. The faint sound of an engine revving echoed behind me, though the road was empty. Then I heard the whisper, low, guttural, and almost human. "You shouldn't have stopped." My stomach dropped. I turned slowly and saw movement in the trees. Figures, dozens of them, emerged from the fog, thin and faceless, their limbs twisting unnaturally. The semi-truck's hazard lights blinked faster, like a warning. I stumbled backward, my mind racing. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs felt heavy, as if the fog itself was holding me in place. The faceless figures advanced slowly, swaying in ways that defied logic, their long limbs stretching and bending as they moved. I glanced at the semi-truck again. The door opened on its own, creaking loudly, revealing an interior darker than the night itself. A cold gust of air escaped the cab, carrying with it a metallic scent, like rusted blood. My heart slammed against my ribs. I tried calling my phone for help. Nothing. No signal, no light, just dead silence. A sudden movement caught my eye. My pickup had reappeared, parked behind the semi as if nothing had ever happened. But the driver's side door was open, and inside, I could see something I will never forget. A shadowy, faceless figure sitting in my seat, waiting, my breath caught in my throat. The faceless figure in my pickup seat didn't move, yet I could feel it staring straight at me, its presence pressing against my mind like ice. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs refused to obey. I was frozen, caught between the creeping shadows of the forest and the impossibly still truck. The whisper returned, low and chilling. "It's yours now." The fog swirled around me, curling over the asphalt, wrapping its cold fingers around my ankles. I realized the semi-truck wasn't just an abandoned vehicle. It was a lure. And the forest, it was alive. I inched closer to the semi, gripping the cab door, trying to muster the courage to look inside. The interior was dark, but I could see shapes, long, thin shadows, pressed into the corners, writhing silently. I stumbled backward, heart racing, as one of the faceless figures stepped into the road. I slammed my eyes shut, whispered a prayer, and ran toward my pickup. The figure followed, gliding across the road with unnatural speed. I dove into the pickup, slamming the door and locking it behind me. The faceless figure in the driver's seat didn't budge, but I could feel its gaze piercing me through the glass. My hands shook violently as I turned the key, and the engine roared to life, breaking the oppressive silence. The mist seemed to cling to the truck as I accelerated onto the highway. Behind me, the figures advanced, gliding across the fog like shadows untethered from reality. My pulse raced, my vision tunneled, every tree along the roadside stretching into grotesque shapes as if mocking my terror. I dared a glance at the rearview mirror. The semi-truck was gone, and with it, the twisting shadows. Yet, for a brief heartbeat, I thought I saw movement inside the bed of my truck. A pale, faceless hand pressed against the metal wall. I floored the accelerator, racing through the fog, praying to see the lights of a town, the promise of safety, anything to escape that nightmare alive. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, shrouded in thick fog. Yet I could feel the weight of the forest pressing in from both sides. My heart pounded so loudly, I was sure anyone nearby could hear it. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle of leaves a threat. I dared not look to the side for fear of what I might see. Then I noticed a flicker of movement in the rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but the shadows formed into a faceless figure, hovering just beyond the edge of the fog. Its limbs were impossibly long, stretching toward me. Yet, it didn't move forward. It was as if it existed in two places at once, both chasing me and waiting for me to make a mistake. I pressed harder on the accelerator. The whispering returned, louder, insistent, almost inhuman. "You can't escape." I felt my chest tighten as if the night itself was trying to crush me. The fog began to thin slightly, revealing the faint glow of headlights in the distance. A small town, salvation. Relief surged through me, but it was fragile, fleeting. The faceless figure in the mirror didn't vanish. Instead, it seemed to stretch, grow, elongating in ways that defied physics. Its pale face blank and unyielding. My pulse raced, my breathing ragged. I gripped the steering wheel like my life depended on it, because it did. I glanced to the side of the road. The forest was alive. Dark silhouettes shifting between trees, watching, waiting, moving in silence. As I approached the first streetlight of the town, the shadow in the mirror dissipated, fading into the fog. My chest heaved as though I had run a marathon. Yet in the back of my mind, I knew it wasn't over. The night had marked me, and I could still feel its presence clinging, waiting for the next time I dared travel that lonely highway. I finally entered the town, the glow of streetlights washing over the asphalt like a promise of safety. My hands trembled, and sweat poured down my face, but I dared to breathe for the first time in hours. The faceless figure was gone, or so I thought. Glancing in the rearview mirror, I froze. For a split second, I could see it, hovering in the mist just beyond the town's outskirts. Its long limbs swayed unnaturally, and though it didn't move closer, its presence pressed into my mind like a physical weight. My pulse thundered, and a cold dread settled deep in my stomach. I realized something terrifying. The highway itself had changed me. No matter how far I drove, no matter how many lights I reached, a part of that shadow followed, marking me, tethering me to the nightmare. I gripped the wheel tighter, whispering a prayer, and prayed the town would finally offer the protection I so desperately needed. Hours later, safely parked at a motel in town, I finally allowed myself to exhale. My hands were raw from gripping the steering wheel, and my mind refused to stop replaying the figures, the fog, the faceless presence in my truck. I looked out the window at the highway stretching into darkness, and my heart froze. The semi-truck was there, parked exactly where I'd seen it before. Empty, yet somehow alive, its hazard lights flickering slowly like a heartbeat. I realized then that the horror wasn't confined to that road. It was patient, waiting for the next traveler, the next fool who dared drive alone through the fog. I never returned to Highway 11 after dark. To this day, when I drive late at night, I swear I feel the same weight pressing against me. The knowledge that something unseen is always watching, always waiting, just beyond the fog. My name is Rachel Owens, and this happened to me during a solo drive across Trans-Canada Highway in Manitoba in late October 2019. The night was cold, the sky an endless black canvas dotted with faint stars. The road stretched for miles with nothing but dense forest and occasional farmlands on either side. I had been driving for hours, and fatigue was starting to cloud my judgment. Around 11:45 p.m., I spotted a figure standing on the shoulder. At first, I thought it was another late-night traveler, but something about the way they stood made my stomach twist. The person was completely still, their silhouette faintly illuminated by my headlights. Without thinking, I slowed down and rolled the window down. They raised a hand, silently asking for a ride. Relief mixed with curiosity, and I pulled over. As they climbed into the passenger seat, I noticed something strange. The figure was pale, almost translucent, with eyes that reflected no light at all. I tried to make conversation, my voice shaky, asking where they were headed. The figure remained silent, staring straight ahead. I noticed their hands were unnaturally still, almost rigid, and a cold chill emanated from them, creeping over my own skin. The warmth of the car seemed to vanish, as if their presence sucked the heat away. The highway stretched endlessly in front of me, and every passing mile felt slower than the last. I caught a glimpse of their reflection in the rearview mirror. Their face was pale, ghostly, and expressionless, yet the eyes seemed to pierce into my mind. I swallowed hard, trying to focus on the road, but the sense of dread kept growing, thick and suffocating. Suddenly, the passenger door handle rattled violently, though no one had touched it. I gasped and jerked the wheel slightly, but the figure remained perfectly still, their presence unmoving and unnerving. Something about them wasn't human, and I knew the night was far from over. A chill ran down my spine as I continued driving. The figure in the passenger seat didn't move or speak, yet I could feel its presence pressing into my mind, whispering faintly, a sound that seemed to echo inside my skull. The car's heater felt useless, and the night air around us seemed colder than outside. The highway was empty, stretching endlessly through dense, dark forest. Every time I glanced at the figure, I felt my heart lurch. Its reflection in the window flickered, almost like it was disappearing and reappearing with every passing tree. Suddenly, I noticed a road sign approaching, one that indicated the town I was heading to. Relief surged briefly, but then horror struck. The passenger side mirror revealed no reflection of the figure. My stomach dropped. The seatbelt buckle was fastened, but the seat itself looked empty. My mind reeled. Had I imagined it? Or was it something that didn't fully exist in our reality? Fear tightened around my chest. I glanced nervously at the back seat. Nothing. No one. But a faint, icy breath brushed my neck, and I swore I could feel the weight of unseen eyes staring at me from the darkness of the car. I forced myself to keep driving, trying to convince my mind this was some hallucination brought on by fatigue. The highway stretched endlessly, lit only by my headlights cutting through the fog. Every shadow along the roadside seemed alive, every tree bending slightly toward the car. Then I saw it again, a faint shape, barely visible, sitting upright in the passenger seat, yet completely translucent. Its eyes, hollow and black, reflected nothing. I blinked, and it vanished. Panic surged. I realized this was no ordinary hitchhiker. Whatever this presence was, it had attached itself to me, and I was trapped, driving alone through the night with something that shouldn't exist, yet was very real. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I sped down the empty highway. The fog seemed to thicken with every passing mile, curling around the car like living fingers. The temperature inside dropped sharply, and my breath fogged the windshield, as if the night itself were exhaling through me. I dared a glance at the passenger seat. Empty. The seatbelt hung loosely, swinging slightly as if something unseen had just shifted. My heart pounded, and a cold dread settled in my stomach. Every instinct screamed at me to pull over, yet I feared stopping even more. Suddenly, a faint whisper brushed my ear. "Why did you stop?" I froze, and my eyes darted around the car. Nothing. The voice had no source, yet it carried the weight of an entire forest's silence. I pressed harder on the accelerator, desperate to reach any sign of civilization. Behind me, I could feel it. The presence of the figure, relentless, tethered to me, following my every turn and heartbeat. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed in a blur of fog and darkness. The highway remained empty, yet I could feel movement in the corners of my eyes, fleeting shadows that vanished the moment I looked directly. The whispering returned, low and urgent, echoing inside my skull. "You can't escape." My pulse raced as I neared the next town. A faint glow of streetlights appeared in the distance, promising safety. I allowed myself a fleeting hope, gripping the wheel tightly. Then I glanced at the passenger seat one last time. The translucent figure was back, sitting upright, pale and faceless, its black eyes boring into me. The air inside the car grew icy, as though the life had been sucked out of the space around it. I slammed my eyes shut and muttered a desperate prayer. When I finally dared to look again, the seat was empty. But I knew it was only a matter of time before it returned. Patient, silent, and unrelenting. The streetlights of the town grew closer, but the oppressive feeling didn't lift. Every shadow seemed to twitch, every flicker of light a trick meant to lure me into a false sense of safety. My pulse pounded as I gripped the wheel, and the whispering returned, louder, echoing from nowhere and everywhere at once. "You can't leave." I dared a glance at the rearview mirror. The fog behind me seemed unnaturally dense, swirling in shapes that suggested something moving just beyond visibility. For a brief second, I thought I saw the faint outline of the figure standing upright in the middle of the road, waiting. My stomach twisted. The car in front of me, a delivery van, sped past, but the figure didn't react. It was tethered to me, bound to the vehicle, patient and relentless. I floored the accelerator, heart hammering, praying the town would finally offer me relief. The first lights of the town finally pierced the darkness, offering a flicker of hope. Relief surged, but my hands continued to shake uncontrollably. I dared to glance at the passenger seat again. Empty. Nothing there. Yet I could still feel the presence, like a cold hand brushing against my mind. I slowed the car as I approached the first intersection, trying to calm my racing heart. The fog began to thin, but the oppressive weight remained. Every streetlight flickered as if reacting to the invisible presence beside me. I realized with dread that the figure had never been fully in the car. It was tethered to me, following me, patient and eternal. No matter how far I drove, no matter how many towns I passed, I could never truly escape it. As I entered the town, I forced myself to look away from the shadows, praying the lights and people around me would offer a brief reprieve from the horror that had clung to my vehicle all night. I finally parked at a small motel on the edge of town, my hands still shaking and my breath ragged. The fog had mostly lifted, but the oppressive feeling lingered, like a weight pressing down on my chest. I forced myself to breathe, trying to convince my mind that the nightmare had ended. Then I saw it again. The faint, ghostly figure appeared briefly in the rearview mirror, standing just beyond the streetlights, staring directly at me. My stomach turned to ice. It didn't move toward me, yet I could feel its intent, patient and relentless, as though it had been following me all along, waiting for the right moment. I realized then that the highway wasn't just a road. It was a conduit. The hitchhiker was tethered to anyone foolish enough to pick it up, haunting their travels, feeding on fear. I had survived the night, but I would never forget the sensation of being watched, hunted, and marked. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had all been exhaustion and imagination. But even in daylight, the feeling of being watched lingered. I stepped outside the car and scanned the empty road. There was no one, no fog, no figure. I drove cautiously, avoiding the stretch where I'd picked up the hitchhiker. But a lingering unease clung to me. Every time I glanced in the passenger seat, I half expected to see it again. Faceless, pale, tethered to me through some invisible thread. Even years later, whenever I drive alone at night, a sense of dread returns, and I catch fleeting glimpses in the corner of my eye. Shadows that aren't mine, movement where nothing exists. The phantom hitchhiker hasn't left me. It's patient, waiting, and I know it will always find its way back onto the road, onto my path, ready to remind me that some encounters are permanent. I slowed down, hoping to make sense of what I was seeing. The snowstorm muffled all sounds except the faint hum of engines. The last truck in the convoy seemed to glance at me, or at least I thought it did. But the driver's face remained blank, expressionless. My curiosity turned into unease as I followed behind them. Every turn, every slight bend in the road, the trucks moved as if guided by a single consciousness. Occasionally, the headlights flickered, revealing glimpses of something in the back. Shadowy figures hunched and unmoving, their presence both terrifying and unnatural. I tried radio communication, but nothing worked. No response, no signal, just static and the relentless snowstorm outside. The highway seemed to stretch endlessly, the forest closing in, and the convoy remained perfectly aligned. A silent procession that was impossible yet very real. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, knowing I had stumbled into something I could neither understand nor escape. I slowed down, hoping to make sense of what I was seeing. The snowstorm muffled all sounds except the faint hum of engines. The last truck in the convoy seemed to glance at me, or at least I thought it did. But the driver's face remained blank, expressionless. My curiosity turned into unease as I followed behind them. Every turn, every slight bend in the road, the trucks moved as if guided by a single consciousness. Occasionally, the headlights flickered, revealing glimpses of something in the back. Shadowy figures hunched and unmoving, their presence both terrifying and unnatural. I tried radio communication, but nothing worked. No response, no signal, just static and the relentless snowstorm outside. The highway seemed to stretch endlessly, the forest closing in, and the convoy remained perfectly aligned. A silent procession that was impossible yet very real. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, knowing I had stumbled into something I could neither understand nor escape. The snowstorm grew heavier, reducing visibility to almost nothing. I kept my distance from the convoy, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that they were aware of me, tracking my movements with some silent intent. The forest on either side of the highway loomed like a wall of shadows, branches clawing at the dim light from the trucks. Then I noticed a detail that froze me in place. The truck's tires left no tracks in the snow, as if they were gliding over the highway rather than driving on it. My pulse quickened, and a cold dread filled me from head to toe. I wanted to turn around, but the storm had erased every landmark, every sign of civilization. A sudden flicker of movement in the last truck's cabin caught my eye. The driver's head tilted unnaturally, stretching toward me in a way that defied anatomy. Panic surged, and I slammed my hands on the wheel, realizing I had become part of something far beyond comprehension. I tried radio contact again, desperation creeping in, but the storm swallowed every word, leaving only static and the oppressive hum of the engines ahead. My eyes darted from truck to truck. The shadowy figures in the beds shifted slightly, unnervingly fluid, yet completely silent. The convoy maintained a perfect formation, moving as if controlled by one mind. I realized with horror that their alignment wasn't normal. It was almost ritualistic, deliberate. My heart pounded, and the wind howled like a chorus of voices through the skeletal trees. I considered pulling over, turning around, anything. But the moment I slowed, the convoy slowed as well. It was as if they were feeding off my fear, reacting to my every action. The night pressed in, snowflakes sharp as glass, and I knew I had no choice but to continue following them deeper into the endless white wilderness. Every mile felt like hours, and every glance at the cab windows revealed faces too still, too blank, and utterly inhuman. The snowstorm intensified, a white wall of cold that blurred the road and forest into one endless void. My hands ached from gripping the wheel, and my breath came in ragged gasps. The convoy's lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the swirling snow. I felt trapped, hemmed in, as though the trucks were herding me, guiding me deeper into the wilderness. Then something impossible happened. One of the semi-trucks veered slightly off the road, its tires still leaving no tracks, and the shadowy figures in the back seemed to turn toward me. I blinked, and the figures stretched unnaturally, limbs bending at impossible angles. Yet they remained perfectly still. My stomach twisted with fear. I considered stopping. But the moment I slowed, the last truck's lights flared, blinding me. The convoy moved in perfect sync, almost alive, like predators circling prey. I realized then that I wasn't following them. They were leading me, and the night had no intention of letting me go. Panic overtook me as the convoy seemed to close in, snowflakes stinging my face through a cracked window. I could feel the presence of the trucks, the figures, and the forest pressing in from all sides. Each heartbeat echoed like a drum in the stillness, blending with the soft hum of engines that seemed almost sentient. A flicker in the rearview mirror made my blood run cold. The last truck appeared directly behind me, impossibly close, as if it had teleported. Its pale, expressionless driver stared through the windshield, eyes dark and hollow. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, but the highway seemed endless, stretching further than it should. I realized the horrifying truth. I had been trapped in this snowstorm, not by nature, but by something far older, patient, and relentless. The convoy wasn't just trucks. It was a hunting ground, a ritualistic procession that marked anyone foolish enough to follow its path. My pulse raced as I clung to the wheel, praying desperately for the lights of civilization ahead. The first faint lights of a distant town finally pierced the blizzard, promising refuge. Yet the feeling of dread didn't lift. My pulse raced, and every shadow in the swirling snow seemed to stretch toward the truck, hungry and alive. I forced myself to focus on the road, praying the convoy would simply vanish into the night. But as I approached the town's outskirts, the last truck mirrored my every movement, maintaining impossible alignment, as if the snowstorm itself bent to its will. I dared to glance into the side mirror and froze. The shadowy figures in the truck bed were now standing upright, motionless but impossibly large, like grotesque guardians waiting for me to falter. My hands tightened around the wheel, knuckles white. The highway had turned into a gauntlet, and I realized the convoy's ritual wasn't over. Every town, every light, was merely a threshold. The night had plans, and I was trapped in its game, a participant in a nightmare that was both ancient and relentless. The town lights grew brighter, but the oppressive presence persisted. Every glance in the mirrors reminded me that the convoy wasn't just behind me. It was tied to me, moving with me, a spectral force that the snowstorm could not obscure. The shadowy figures remained still, but their presence radiated something ancient and malevolent. I tried to accelerate, desperate to reach safety. But the road seemed endless, stretching unnaturally ahead. Each mile was a test, a challenge, a warning. I realized that the convoy's purpose wasn't to transport cargo. It was to mark and haunt those who dared follow. As I entered the first street light of the town, a fleeting sense of relief passed, yet my skin crawled. The figures did not vanish completely. They lingered in the periphery, silent and patient. The night had not ended, and I knew I would never see that highway the same way again. The town offered a fragile sanctuary, but the terror of the convoy would follow me forever. The town finally loomed ahead. Buildings faintly illuminated through the lingering snow and fog, promising a place to breathe, to escape. I slowed the truck, hoping the convoy would vanish in the morning light. But when I glanced in the side mirror, my heart stopped. The last semi-truck was impossibly close, moving in perfect sync, tires leaving no marks in the snow. The figures inside and in the beds had not moved, yet their presence pressed down on me like a living weight. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but the highway felt endless, frozen in time, trapping me in this relentless nightmare. I realized the horror wasn't just the convoy. It was the ritual, the slow, inevitable marking of anyone who dared follow. The figures were patient, eternal, and utterly inhuman. I had survived the highway, but I would carry the memory, the terror, and the feeling of being hunted forever. I parked at the first motel I could find shaking uncontrollably, snow crunching under my boots. The lights of the town were warm, promising safety, yet a deep unease lingered. Every glance at the highway beyond the town reminded me of the convoy. Still waiting, still patient, ready to resume its ritual. The following morning, I ventured back onto the highway with trepidation. No trucks, no figures, only endless snow and the whispering wind through the skeletal trees. Yet every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I could feel their presence, as if the convoy had left a mark on me, a tether I could not sever. Years later, I still drive cautiously on these highways. I avoid winter nights and empty roads. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I see the flicker of headlights in the corner of my eye, perfectly aligned, silently reminding me that some encounters are permanent and some nightmares are eternal.